While the United States is still debating which quantum architecture will win the race, China just answered that question by refusing to pick one. In May 2026, China did not launch one quantum computer. It launched 3 almost simultaneously, each one built on a completely different physical foundation, each one aimed at a different piece of the quantum puzzle. This was not a coincidence, and it was not a publicity stunt. It was a deliberate, coordinated demonstration that China is no longer following anyone else's roadmap in quantum computing. It is running 3 roadmaps at once. Let's start with the headline machine, because it is the one that has physicists genuinely stunned. It's called Zhuzhong 4.0, developed by a team at the University of Science and Technology of China, led by physicists Chaoyang Liu and Jianwei Pan. This is a photonic quantum computer, meaning it processes information using particles of light instead of electrical circuits or trapped ions. In May 2026, the team published results in the journal Nature showing that Zhuzhong 4.0 had manipulated and detected quantum states involving up to 3,050 photons. To put that in context, the previous version, Zhuzhong 3.0, topped out at 255 photons. That is more than a 10-fold leap in scale in less than 3 years. Here's why that number actually matters. The machine was tasked with solving something called the Gaussian boson sampling problem, a notoriously difficult computational challenge that classical supercomputers struggle with as the scale increases. According to the research team, the most complex sample Zhuzhong 4.0 generated took just 25 microseconds to produce. The world's most powerful classical supercomputer, by the team's own calculation, would need more than 10 to the 42nd power years to calculate. The same result. Read that again. Not years, not centuries. A number so large it has no real-world meaning, next to a machine that did it in a fraction of the blink of an eye. What makes Zhuzhong 4.0 particularly impressive from an engineering standpoint is that the team also solved one of photonic computing's biggest historical weaknesses, photon loss. Light particles are notoriously fragile and tend to scatter or get absorbed before they can be measured, which has limited how large photonic systems could scale. The new system achieved 92% source efficiency and 51% overall system efficiency, numbers that represent a major leap over previous experiments in this field. Researchers involved in the project say this breakthrough opens the door to what they call trillion-qubit mode, 3-dimensional cluster states, a foundational step toward fault-tolerant optical quantum computing hardware down the line. But Zhuzhong 4.0 was only one of the 3 machines China rolled out around the same window. The second is Origin Wukong 180. Developed by Origin Quantum, a company spun out of the University of Science and Technology of China back in 2017. This machine takes a completely different approach. Instead of photons, it uses superconducting qubits, the same general technology path that companies like Google and IBM have bet heavily on in the West. Wukong 180 packs 180 active computational qubits onto a single superconducting chip, and critically, every core system inside it, the chip itself, the measurement and control systems, the environmental support infrastructure, and even the operating system, was entirely self-developed within China. This is not an assembled system built from licensed foreign components. It is a fully domestic superconducting quantum stack, and that detail matters enormously for a country trying to reduce its dependence on Western technology supply chains. Origin Quantum did not stop at building the hardware. In February 2026, just months before Wukong 180 launched, the company released something called Origin Pilot, described as the first publicly downloadable quantum computer operating system, built to support multiple hardware types including superconducting, ion trap, and neutral atom systems. That is a strategically important move, because it signals China is not just building individual machines, it is building the software layer that could eventually let developers write once and run across multiple types of quantum hardware, regardless of which physical approach wins out long term. The third machine, rounding out this trio, takes yet another completely different path: neutral atom quantum computing. This approach uses individual atoms suspended and controlled with lasers, and it comes with a major practical advantage. Unlike superconducting systems, which require bulky dilution refrigerators to keep qubits cooled to nearly absolute zero, neutral atom systems can potentially run at room temperature, eliminating the need for the extreme cooling infrastructure that makes other quantum computers so expensive and difficult to deploy. Chinese firms have been aggressively pushing this frontier, with systems like Hanyuan 2 emerging in May 2026 as dual-core cabinet designs that require no ultra-low temperature cooling at all and consume less than 7 kilowatts of power, a fraction of what traditional superconducting installations demand. Now here's the part that should genuinely concern anyone tracking the global technology balance of power. 3 different physical architectures, photonic, superconducting, and neutral atom, all reaching major milestones within roughly the same window, is not something that happens by accident in a fragmented research ecosystem. It requires coordinated national investment, shared research infrastructure, and enough manufacturing capacity to build multiple complex quantum systems in parallel. According to research tracked by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, China's Anhui Quantum Computing Engineering Research Center has already built the capacity to assemble 8 quantum computers simultaneously, up from 5 previously. That is not a research lab running one experiment at a time. That is closer to an industrial production line for a technology most of the world still treats as experimental. Compare that to how the story has typically been told in the West. For years, the dominant narrative was straightforward. America leads in quantum hardware, and China is playing catch-up, chasing headline numbers without the deeper commercial ecosystem to back them up. That narrative is getting harder to defend. The United States absolutely still holds real advantages, including a deeper bench of independent quantum computing companies and stronger commercial partnerships across its ecosystem. But on raw experimental milestones, the picture has shifted. China's Zhuchongji 3.0 processor posted a result in 2025 that was directly competitive with Google's own Willow chip, one of the most celebrated quantum achievements to come out of Silicon Valley. And now, instead of chasing a single architecture to prove a point, China is running 3 fundamentally different quantum computing bets simultaneously, essentially hedging against the uncertainty of which physical approach will ultimately dominate the industry. This multi-architecture strategy is not just smart from an engineering perspective, it is smart from a geopolitical one. Nobody actually knows for certain today whether superconducting qubits, photonic systems, neutral atom arrays, or some other approach entirely will end up being the winning long-term platform for large-scale, fault-tolerant quantum computing. Betting everything on one horse is a real risk. By funding and industrializing all 3 major paths at once, China is essentially guaranteeing that whichever architecture eventually wins the race, it will already have a mature, domestically built, fully self-sufficient program sitting at the frontier of that specific technology. That is a very different posture than most Western quantum efforts, which tend to be split across competing private companies, each betting heavily on a single architecture and racing each other for investor dollars, rather than coordinating around a shared national strategy. It's also worth understanding what these different quantum approaches are actually good for, because they are not interchangeable. Superconducting systems like Wukong 180 are currently the most mature path toward general purpose, programmable quantum computing, and they are what most people picture when they think of quantum computers. Photonic systems like Zhuchang 4.0 excel at specific sampling and simulation problems and offer a potential path toward room temperature operation and easier integration with existing fiber optic communication infrastructure. Neutral atom systems offer scalability and lower infrastructure costs, making them attractive for eventual commercial deployment outside of highly specialized government or research labs. China running major breakthroughs across all 3 routes at once means it is simultaneously positioning itself to dominate general computation, specialized simulation, and scalable commercial deployment, rather than betting the entire national strategy on a single outcome. There's a reason China quantum computer has become one of the most searched technology terms this year, and it's not just about bragging rights over qubit counts. It's about what this kind of coordinated, multi-front technological push actually signals for the next decade. Quantum computing, once mature, is expected to eventually reshape fields ranging from cryptography and secure communications to drug discovery, materials science, and financial modeling. Whoever builds the deepest, most diversified quantum foundation now is positioning themselves to capture outsized advantages across all of those industries later, not just one. It's also worth stepping back and looking at how this fits into China's broader quantum ambitions, because these 3 machines did not appear out of nowhere. China's quantum program has been building for close to a decade. Back in 2016, China launched the world's first quantum satellite, known as MICUS, followed a year later by a fiber optic quantum communication network stretching more than 2,000 kilometers. In March 2025, an international team led by USTC and Chinese Academy of Sciences institutes, working alongside researchers at Stellenbosch University, successfully established the world's longest intercontinental quantum satellite link, connecting Beijing all the way to Stellenbosch in South Africa, a distance exceeding 12,900 kilometers. That kind of achievement does not happen without years of sustained investment and a long-term national commitment to owning every layer of quantum technology, not just computing hardware, but communication and cryptography infrastructure as well. This long-game approach traces directly back to formal government planning. China's 14th Five-Year Plan, published in 2021, explicitly identified quantum communications, quantum computing, quantum simulators, and quantum precision measurement as strategic priority areas, with commitments to increase research and development spending in these sectors by more than 7% annually. That is not a vague political promise. That is a multi-year budgetary commitment baked directly into national economic planning, and the 3 quantum computers launched in May 2026 are best understood as visible proof points of that plan actually paying off on schedule. The commercial dimension of this story is just as important as the scientific one. Origin Quantum's Wukong platform has not stayed locked inside a research lab. Since its original 72-qubit version launched in January 2024, the machine has run stably on a public cloud platform for more than 2 years, logging tens of millions of remote accesses from users in over 160 countries around the world. In 2025, the company went a step further and completed what is described as China's first export of domestic quantum computing power, essentially selling access to Chinese-built quantum infrastructure to customers beyond its own borders. Origin Quantum has also signed agreements to build what could become Europe's largest integrated quantum computing center, located in Malaga, Spain. In other words, this is not just about proving a scientific point domestically. China is actively exporting its quantum computing capability and building international commercial footholds for it, the same way it has done with telecommunications infrastructure over the past decade. Meanwhile, the neutral atom side of China's quantum push is moving just as aggressively into commercial territory. Companies working in this space have already secured tens of millions of yuan in orders for their systems, including international sales. One notable example involved a neutral atom quantum system being sold abroad to help establish another country's first national quantum computing capability. That detail matters because it shows China is not simply building quantum hardware for domestic prestige projects. It is positioning itself as an exporter of quantum infrastructure to other nations, potentially becoming the supplier of choice for countries that lack the resources to build their own quantum programs from scratch. In much the same way it became a dominant global supplier of telecom and surveillance technology in previous technology cycles. All of this raises an uncomfortable strategic question for policymakers in Washington and other Western capitals. If China is simultaneously leading on experimental milestones across 3 distinct quantum architectures, exporting quantum computing, power internationally, building an operating system meant to unify multiple hardware types and expanding manufacturing capacity to assemble multiple quantum machines in parallel. At what point does the China is just chasing headlines narrative stop being a useful way to think about the competitive landscape? Individual American companies remain genuinely innovative and continue producing world-class results, but they are largely competing against each other for private investment dollars rather than operating inside a single coordinated national strategy the way China's quantum ecosystem does. To be fair, quantum computing as a field is still far from delivering the kind of transformative real-world applications that would justify calling any single country the definitive winner today. Building a machine that demonstrates quantum advantage on a narrow, specialized mathematical problem, like Gaussian boson sampling, is genuinely impressive science, but it is a very different achievement than building a fault-tolerant, general-purpose quantum computer capable of solving practical industrial problems at scale. That gap between experimental milestone and commercial usefulness is still enormous, and it is a gap every country working on quantum computing, including China, still has to close. But that is exactly what makes China's 3-machine launch so strategically significant. It is not a bet that one specific technical gap will close first. It is a bet that by running multiple architectures in parallel, funded by sustained national investment and backed by real manufacturing capacity, China maximizes its odds of being at the frontier no matter which quantum computing approach eventually crosses that gap first. It is the technological equivalent of hedging a portfolio across multiple asset classes instead of putting everything into a single stock, except the stakes here are not investment returns. They are dominance over what may become one of the most economically and militarily significant technologies of the next 50 years. If you found this breakdown useful, do not forget to like and subscribe, because the quantum computing race is only accelerating from here, and we are going to keep breaking down exactly who is pulling ahead and why. Because while the rest of the world debates which quantum technology will eventually win, China just made it clear it doesn't plan on waiting to find out. It's building all of them at once,